Hello, everyone. This is MC Deck Discussions, and I am Abi Small. And today we have another deck discussion, this time with Wasp in Aggression. And I thought it might be interesting. It occurred to me as I was playtesting this deck and making some of my changes that it actually might be kind of interesting for people to see where a deck might start for me and where it might end up as I'm doing my playtesting. So I have here on the left side, you can see it says Small But Mightier, which is the name of the deck, right? I kept that name. And here it is, the pre-tested version of it. So the original version had 41 cards. My refined version ended up having 40. And I wanted to show you the differences between the decks here. So first of all, notice that this one, the original, contained 8 allies. The ending one contained 9, and I'll talk about those differences in a little bit. Events-wise, the original contained 14 events, and this one contained 13 events. The difference there, so this is the first important difference, is melee. So in this deck, so let me blow up the original one here, the one that was pre-tested. So my goal was to use Hone Technique, and the reason I thought this might be an interesting card to play with Wasp is because Wasp has this great alter ego ability, right? So look at her alter ego ability, which is GIRL, has this action: shuffle up to 2 cards with a printed mental resource from your discard pile into your deck. Plus, she has the genius trait. So what that means is that because she has the genius trait, she can easily play ingenuity, or she can play it when she's on her alter ego side, and then she can use it as a resource generator on either the alter ego side or on her hero side. So that makes a very easy resource generator to use Hone Technique. So Hone Technique, first of all, in order to play it, you have to have 2 mental resources. And this deck also has Quinn Carrier, so that can always provide the second mental resource, but there are also a whole lot of mental resource cards in this deck. You can just see a whole bunch of them right in here, okay? And so it's pretty easy to play Honed Technique, though I typically would not play it my first pass through a deck, and maybe not even the second pass through. So you might wonder, oh, how many pass throughs do you have? I could end up having a fair number because this deck, because it's a genius, she's genius traded on her alter ego side. Like my other Wasp decks, it includes Moon Girl, right? And so Moon Girl is the 3-cost card, has 2 attack, 2 thwart, and has double consequential damage for both. And the most important thing about her, well, first of all, you can play her only if your identity has the champion or genius trait. So the genius trait is the key in this case. And she has this response: after you play Moon Girl from your hand, draw 1 card for each mental resource used to pay for her. So the goal is to, when you pay for her, use 3 mental resources, which is pretty easy to do in a deck that's built like this, and therefore draw 3 cards. In addition, there's also Nick Fury. Nick Fury has a mental resource, so it can be cycled back into the deck, just like Moon Girl, just like Ironheart, just like Professor X. But Nick Fury and Moon Girl in particular, Nick Fury also allows you to draw 3 cards. So you can go through your deck pretty quickly by continuing to go down to alter ego side, recycle cards back into your deck. So that means you can have multiple pass-throughs before needing to get Hone Technique out, and instead get some of the other more important cards that are, or I should say they're more important cards initially, like Quinn Carrier and Helicarrier and Ingenuity, possibly Avengers Mansion. So then when you have Hone Technique out, you have the ability to then play. So let's look at Hone Technique now. So it requires 2 mental resource icons to play it, and then it has this interrupt. It is a 3-cost card, has an interrupt. When you play an aggression attack event, specifically aggression attack event, if you paid for that event using a mental resource, increase the amount of damage that event deals by its printed cost. So initially, I thought, okay, so it would be nice to have Dive Bomb in there because Moon Girl, just 1 copy though, Moon Girl can acquire flight, right? So Dive Bomb can only be played if you have the aerial trait, and she can acquire the aerial trait with her biosynthetic wings. So Wasp gains the aerial trait, has this interrupt, which I don't really care about here. The main thing I care about is that it's giving her the aerial trait. That's the big feature, which allows her to play Dive Bomb. But if I don't happen to have it out, I don't want to get stuck with a bunch of Dive Bomb, so I just include one copy of Dive Bomb. Okay? Also included which means, I should probably mention that, right? So Dive Bomb can deal 7 damage to an enemy, deal 1 damage to each other enemy, and it's a 4-cost card. So if you play Dive Bomb with Hone Technique, and I know a lot of you know this, but others might not, then you increase the amount of damage that the event deals by its printed cost. So Dive Bomb has a printed cost of 4. So instead of dealing 7 damage and then 1 damage to each other enemy, it can deal 11 damage to an enemy, plus 1 plus 4, 5 damage to each other enemy. So it can be a very powerful card. But, like I said, I want to be able to rely on it. And so I only rely on the fact that I actually would have the aerial trait. So I only included 1 copy just for kind of, safety's sake. But I also included 2 full body charges. Full body charge, also a 4-cost event. And when this is an attack event that deals 8 damage to an enemy, and if your hero's remaining hit points are less than half your hero's starting hit points, this attack gains overkill. I don't normally try to do that, but it certainly happens. But the main thing is, to me, that it's 8 damage plus 4 more, which is 12 damage. So you can always do the 8 damage, but once you get out Hone Technique, now it does 12 damage. And then I also included melee for 2 reasons. One reason is, hey, this is a pretty powerful card once you have Hone Technique out, because then it deals 3 damage to an enemy, 3 damage to another enemy, plus the 3 damage here when Hone Technique is out, so 6 damage to an enemy and 6 damage to another enemy, and it has the mental resource icon. So I thought, this is my initial build. So I thought, well, this is nice, because then with that mental resource icon, I can also recycle it back into the deck. Okay. And then I have another couple of cards that are important to point out, partly because I end up getting rid of them. So I also thought that Keep Up the Pressure would be a nice card to have in here, right? So it's a what do you call it? A player side scheme, and it's 0 cost, and it only two threat per person per player to remove. And it has this: when defeated, each player may search their deck and discard pile for an attack event, add it to their hand, and until the end of the phase, each attack event deals 1 additional damage. So I thought, that would be pretty nice as well. And then in order to facilitate, because I have these 3 cards plus Hone Technique, and then with Dive Bomb, a couple of full body charge and melee, right? That's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 aggression cards that cost that are more than 2 costs. So I figured I'd add a couple of power of aggression cards, resource cards, right? That are in order to facilitate playing those cards. Okay? And the deck was working great. So if you look at who I play tested against, and it doesn't have the description here, but if you look in the refined one, I have my deck description, right? And I play tested it in standard and expert against Claw, Taskmaster, Red Skull, and Magneto. Against Claw, worked fantastically, Taskmaster as well, but I got to Red Skull and I started hitting some major speed bumps. I was having a real challenge. I first lost in just standard, and then won in the second play. But then tried an expert and lost a couple times there, 2 or 3 times, I can't remember. But I was like, wow, this just really isn't working. At first, I thought it was just super bad luck, because I really liked the deck. It seemed like it was a pretty good control deck because of all the recycling, but it just wasn't consistent enough. So I made some refinements. So let me mention which cards that I removed. Okay. So I removed from this, melee was one of them. So now I only have 3 of these event cards. And that might not seem like enough of these red event cards, these aggression event cards. But remember, we're cycling through this deck fairly rapidly because of constantly going down to Alter Ego's side, bringing in Moon Girl and Nick Fury. And the reason we can keep going to to alter ego side is because we also have Professor X and Psylocke. So I should mention that, right? So Psylocke, 4-cost ally, 1 attack and 2 thwart, 3 health, Psionic and X-Men, and Psylocke enters play with 2 psionic counters on her, and she has this interrupt. When Psylocke attacks an enemy, remove 1 psionic counter from her, confuse that enemy, and deal 1 damage to it. Note that, just like Professor X, Psylocke also has a mental resource icon, so both of those can be recycled back into the deck using Wasp's alter ego ability. So you can, in addition to recycling Moon Girl and Nick Fury back into the deck, as well as, by the way, the Genius double resource, right? It's a double resource, so recycling that back in. You know, Professor and Psylocke come back, putting them back into the deck periodically, so you can keep going down to alter ego side, works as well. So with that in mind, the overall being able to go down to alter ego side a lot and playing Moon Girl and Nick Fury a lot, Nick Fury can be played on either side, then we cycle through the deck relatively quickly, especially for an aggression deck, which means we see Dive Bomb and these 2 full body. So there are only 3 of them, but that's enough. You see them pretty frequently with going through the deck. So it turned out I didn't really need Keep Up the Pressure, and I didn't need melee. And because of that, I also took out these 2 Power of Aggression and replaced one of them with the Power in All of Us. And then there were 2 other, so that's altogether, by the way, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4 cards that I removed, right? But I added 1 back, so the Power in All of Us, and then I added in 2 other cards. So let's look at what those 2 other cards are. All right, so this is the finished deck right here, right? The refined deck. So the 2 other cards were Vivian. So Vivian turned out to be a really cool card to add into here. I was tempted to add Vivian in the first place, but Vivian was a really nice addition, so making this now 9 allies. And she has Aerial, Android, and Champion. She's a 2-cost basic card. And she has this hero response. After Vivian enters play, choose an attachment, non-elite minion, or non-permanent side scheme. Until the end of the round, treat that card's printed text box as if it were blank, except for the traits. And so she ended up being a really nice addition for here and there, being able to blank out. Most of the time I found that it could be an attachment, but most of the time it was a non-permanent side scheme. Although sometimes a non-elite minion, blank them out so that they wouldn't end up bringing out another encounter card afterwards or some other type of card. So she ended up being a nice addition in against certain villains. And then I also, I think I started to mention this, so I also now have 2 copies of the Power in All of Us, so that's actually now 2 cards. And then I added 1 more card. So I was thinking, you know what? What if I were to include Crew Quarters? So Crew Quarters is a 1-cost support, and you can play under any player's control, max 1 per player, and it has an alter ego action. Exhaust Crew Quarters, heal 1 damage from an alter ego. And because Wasp goes down to alter ego side frequently, that means that she would be able to heal frequently. And usually, what it really means is you heal 2. You heal 1 when you go there, and then you heal another 1 before you leave alter ego to go back to hero in the next turn. So every time you go down to alter ego side, you actually end up healing for 2. Why does that especially matter with Wasps? Well, Wasp has this particular card in her deck called Rapid Growth, and it's a 1-cost event. And you play this when you are in tiny hero form because it has this hero interrupt. When you use one of your hero's basic powers, typically a thwart or attack for me, change to your giant hero form and get +2 to that power for this use. So then instead of, because her normally when she's in giant hero form, it's not, we can't see this here, but she in giant hero, this is the tiny hero form, but in giant hero form, she has 2 thwart and 2 attack. So then she has 4 thwart and 4 attack. And I actually should show her giant hero form. So let me go find that. All right, so here we go. So here she is in her giant hero form. She has 2 thwart and 2 attack. And just as importantly, let me zoom in a little so you can see this better. Okay. So just as importantly, when she uses her thwart or her attack, notice it has this asterisk here, Threat you remove using your basic thwart power can be divided among schemes as you choose, and damage you do using your basic attack power can be divided among enemies as you choose. So she does 4 thwart or 4 attack when she uses that card. Let's go back to that card. Okay, so this card, Rapid Growth, it gave her +2 to those attacks, so she ends up with 4 thwart or attack. So all of a sudden, she had more capacity to deal with minions and side schemes just by allowing her not to have to heal herself, and instead could use crew quarters. It was a very cool little change that I'm probably going to include in my future builds more frequently, so that she could deal with those, like I said, deal with those side schemes and minions more easily. And also plink off some toughs if she's doing an attack, because she can spread out her damage to multiple characters, multiple enemies. So those were the changes I made. I removed 4 cards and I added 3 back in. Vivian, +1 power in all of us, plus this crew quarters. And that made all the difference. So all of a sudden, it was a much more powerful deck. Took on Expert Red Skull and defeated it. Took on Magneto in both Standard and Expert and defeated Magneto in both of those, and just felt like so much more of a controlled deck, and it worked just as it was supposed to. So I wouldn't put in Hone Technique right at the beginning. I would often skip on Biosynthetic Wings that gives her the aerial trait in the beginning, partly because I knew that I could get Biosynthetic Wings in later on with my superpower training as well, right? So that's a player side scheme. When defeated, each player may search their deck and discard pile for an identity-specific upgrade and put it into play. So that's the whole purpose of this card, is to put into play Biosynthetic Wings, at least if it's not in play already, and most of the time it wasn't. And then so eventually in my second, maybe third pass through the deck, I would have Hone Technique out, and then, and very often Biosynthetic Wings out, and I would be able to play Dive Bomb and Full Body Charge for those mighty attacks. And so I did end up having, like one game, I ended up with a final burst damage of total of 33 points of damage, being able to do, a Full Body Charge does just 12 damage all by itself, and Dive Bomb does then another 11. So I did 23 damage just from that. And then I happened to have out Wolverine, and I was drawing cards, and so I actually dealt a whole lot of damage in that particular game. But very consistently, I dealt a lot of burst damage right at the end with Dive Bomb and with Full Body Charge and or Dive Bomb. To often finishing the game, finishing off the villain. So this was a very fun deck, and it was, and I actually really enjoyed showing it this way. So I might do this a lot more in the future. It is very rare that my decks don't, when I go through my playtesting, it's extremely rare for my decks not to change as I'm doing that playtesting, as I see things that just aren't quite working the way I had planned them. And so this is an example of the result. So hopefully this is a deck you might either be inspired by to make your own builds, or that you might like to try yourself. But I do find it a very fun deck. And like I said, it turned out to be, I have a summary here. It turned out to be a deck that ran very smoothly, proved highly capable, and it still had that ability to finish villains with a great deal of burst damage. So it ended up being a controlled deck that packs a mighty punch. And that's why it's called Small But Even Mightier. Her ability on the front, her tiny ability, is Small But Mighty. And so with this aggression deck, it's now Small But Even Mightier. All right. That's it. Please, if you enjoyed this content, please like and subscribe. And also please comment. I enjoy having conversations with people and seeing what people have to say. So have a good one, and I'll talk to you next time.